I don't know what made me agree to house sit for Mrs. Appleton. Maybe it was the extra cash. Maybe it was guilt, knowing she was the only one in town who still brought casseroles when someone was sick. Either way, there I was, alone in a creaky Victorian house on the outskirts of our sleepy little town. The night started out fine. The house was huge, with floors that groaned under your weight, walls lined with faded floral wallpaper, and the kind of heavy silence that presses against your ears. Mrs. Appleton had left me a long list of instructions about her cat, Penny, who I still hadn't seen. She'd also mentioned the basement door being fickle, and to leave it alone unless absolutely necessary. Of course, the first time I heard a sound coming from the basement, I told myself it was just the old pipes groaning. Then it came again. This time, a dragging noise, like furniture scraping against the floor. Penny? Maybe she was trapped down there. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and opened the door. The basement stairs stretched down into a darkness that swallowed the weak glow of my flashlight. The air immediately changed as I descended, becoming damp and heavy, carrying a faint metallic tang that I couldn't place. Each step creaked loudly beneath my feet, the sound echoing in the silence. "Penny," I called, my voice thin and uncertain. No response. The dragging noise came again, sharper this time, sending a chill crawling up my spine. I reached the bottom of the stairs and swung the light around the room. It was a typical basement. Cement floor, exposed beams, and an assortment of old furniture shrouded in dusty sheets. Nothing seemed out of place. Then, my flashlight beam caught something that froze me in my tracks. At the far end of the room, the sheet covering an antique vanity was moving. Not in the way fabric shifts in a draft. No, it was deliberate, a slow, rippling motion, as though something was under it. My heart pounded in my chest, and my feet felt rooted to the spot. "Penny," I tried again, my voice barely more than a whisper. The sheet went still. I held my breath, the silence pressing against my ears. Summoning every ounce of courage, I took a step closer. My phone's light trembled in my hand as I reached for the sheet. I could hear my own heartbeat, a frantic drumbeat in the oppressive quiet. Just as my fingers grazed the fabric, the dragging noise erupted again, this time directly behind me. I spun around, dropping my phone in the process. The flashlight beam skittered across the floor before settling on a shadow that didn't belong. It wasn't Penny. The shadow moved, stretching unnaturally tall against the wall. My blood turned to ice as I realized it wasn't being cast by anything in the room. It shifted and twisted, detached from logic, defying the laws of light. Then it lunged. I stumbled back, falling hard against the concrete floor as the shadow closed the distance. My breath caught in my throat, and I clawed for my phone. The light was weak, barely illuminating the shape now towering over me, its edges writhing like smoke caught in a violent wind. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice cracking with fear. The shadow stopped abruptly, looming just inches away. Then, slowly, it began to morph. A face emerged, pale and hollow-eyed, its features shifting and indistinct, like a reflection in rippling water. Its mouth stretched open, wider than should have been possible, revealing a dark void that seemed to suck in the very air around me. I scrambled to my feet, backing toward the stairs. The creature didn't follow but instead pointed, a long, spindly finger of inky blackness, toward the far corner of the basement. I didn't want to look, but my eyes betrayed me. The beam of my flashlight wavered as I turned it toward the corner, where an old wardrobe stood, its door slightly ajar. The dragging noise came again, faint but unmistakable, emanating from within. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of the house, but my legs felt like lead. The shadow tilted its head, as if amused by my hesitation, and then it moved again, this time merging with the floor, seeping into the cracks like oil. I blinked, and it was gone. The basement was silent once more, but the sense of wrongness lingered, heavier than ever. My shaking hand gripped the doorknob of the wardrobe. Part of me knew I shouldn't open it. Whatever was inside, whatever had been dragging, waiting, wasn't meant to be found. But I couldn't stop myself. With a trembling breath, I flung the door open. Inside was Penny, or at least it was something that looked like Penny. Her eyes were too large, glowing faintly in the dim light, and her mouth was twisted into a grotesque smile that no cat should ever wear. She hissed, a low, guttural sound that didn't belong to anything natural. And then she spoke. "Leave the house. Now." My mind reeled, rejecting what I'd just heard. Cats don't talk. Cats can't talk. Yet there Penny sat, her unblinking, two large eyes fixed on mine, her twisted grin growing wider. "Leave now," she repeated. The voice unnervingly human but layered with a guttural undertone, like two people speaking in unison. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the edge of the carpet. My flashlight flickered, the beam dimming as if the very air was draining its energy. I turned toward the stairs, ready to flee, when I felt a sudden shift in the room. The wardrobe creaked open wider, and the space around me seemed to warp, like heat waves shimmering off asphalt. The once dusty sheets covering the furniture now billowed as though stirred by a fierce wind, though the air was deathly still. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the walls, forming shapes, faces, mouths, eyes, writhing in silent torment. Behind me, Penny, or whatever had taken her form, laughed. It was a hideous sound, wet and gurgling, like a voice struggling to escape a drowning throat. I bolted for the stairs, my pulse thundering in my ears. 2 steps up, I felt it, a cold, clammy grip around my ankle. I screamed, twisting around to see what had caught me. The shadow was back, its form now solid and clawed, dragging me down. "No! Let me go!" I kicked frantically, the flashlight slipping from my grip and clattering down the steps. The beam landed on Penny, or the thing in her skin. Her form was melting now, for sliding off like dripping wax to reveal something raw and pulsing beneath. She opened her mouth again, impossibly wide, and let out a shriek that rattled the walls. The shadow yanked harder, pulling me closer to the wardrobe. Its door gaped open like a hungry maw, and from the darkness inside, faint whispers began to echo. They weren't in English. They weren't in any language I'd ever heard, but they burrowed into my brain like splinters. I reached for the banister, gripping it with every ounce of strength I had left. "You're not real," I shouted, my voice shaking. "This isn't real." The whispers grew louder, the shadow's grip tightening, icy cold seeping into my skin. Just when I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, the basement door above me slammed open. "Get out of there!" a voice bellowed. It was Mrs. Appleton. She stood at the top of the stairs, holding a lantern that burned with an unnatural blue light. The moment the glow hit the basement, the shadow recoiled with an ear-piercing screech, releasing me. Penny let out a final, guttural hiss before her body collapsed, limp and lifeless. The warped, billowing air stilled. The shadows retreated to the corners, fading like mist in the morning sun. "Come on now," Mrs. Appleton shouted, waving me up the stairs. I didn't need to be told twice. I scrambled up the steps, heart hammering, and bolted past her into the safety of the kitchen. She slammed the door shut behind me, twisting the lock with shaking hands. "What the hell was that?" I demanded, my voice hoarse. Mrs. Appleton sighed, her face pale but calm. "I told you not to mess with the basement." I stared at Mrs. Appleton, my chest heaving. "That wasn't in your instructions. What was down there? What was that thing?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she set the lantern on the table, its eerie blue flame casting long, wavering shadows across the room. "It wasn't supposed to wake up," she muttered almost to herself. "Not yet." My hands clenched into fists. "You're going to tell me what's going on, or I'm walking out of here and calling the cops." She shook her head, a small, humorless laugh escaping her lips. "And tell them what? That you were attacked by shadows and a cat that spoke? They'd lock you up faster than you could say haunted." I opened my mouth to argue but stopped short. She wasn't wrong. "Fine," I snapped. "Then tell me, what is it? What's in your basement?" Mrs. Appleton sank into a chair, her shoulders slumping. For the first time, she looked old. Much older than I'd ever noticed. "It's not what was in the basement," she said. "It's what the house is built on." The words sent a fresh wave of unease rippling through me. "What do you mean?" She gestured to the lantern. "This house sits on a vein. A crack in the world where things leak through. Things that don't belong here." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, but her expression was dead serious. "You're saying your house is what? A portal?" "Not quite." Her gaze flicked toward the basement door. "It's more like a magnet. It draws them, whatever they are. Most of the time, the wards I have in place keep them asleep. But sometimes, things slip through the cracks." I swallowed hard. "Like the shadow." She nodded. "And like Penny." My stomach twisted. "Penny, was she?" "She was my cat once," Mrs. Appleton said softly. "She disappeared a few weeks ago. I hoped she'd just run off, but deep down I knew." She met my eyes, her voice trembling. Whatever came back wearing her skin wasn't her. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I wanted to deny it, to laugh it off as the ramblings of an old woman. But I'd seen too much. The shadow, the warped air, the whispers, the thing that spoke in Penny's voice. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Appleton stood, her movements slow and deliberate. "Now I fix what you've disturbed, and you get out of here." I didn't argue. She handed me my coat and practically shoved me toward the door. As I stepped onto the porch, I turned back to her. "What if it follows me?" "It won't," she said firmly. "It's tied to the house, but don't come back." Her words were final. The door shut with a resounding thud, the lock clicking into place. I stood on the porch, the chill night air biting at my skin, staring at the darkened windows of the house. As I walked away, I swore I could feel eyes on me, watching from the shadows. I didn't go straight home. Something about the house, the basement, Mrs. Appleton's cryptic warnings, gnawed at me, refusing to let go. I parked my car a few blocks away and sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the glowing clock on the dashboard. Every sound outside, the rustle of leaves, the hum of a passing car, felt sharper, closer. My brain was on high alert, hyper-aware of everything and nothing at the same time. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd brought something with me, that something had slipped through the cracks and hitched a ride. Eventually, exhaustion won out. I drove home, locked every door and window, and collapsed into bed without even bothering to change. But sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it came with dreams. I was back in the basement, the warped air pressing down on me like a physical weight. The wardrobe door hung open, revealing nothing but blackness. A void so complete it seemed to pulse with its own malevolence. The whispers returned, louder this time, slithering into my ears and wrapping around my mind. I jolted awake, drenched in sweat. My bedroom was dark, but it didn't feel empty. I reached for my phone, fumbling with the flashlight, and swept the beam across the room. Nothing, but the unease didn't fade. The silence felt too thick, too deliberate, like something was holding its breath, waiting. I tried to shake it off. "It's just the stress," I whispered to myself, my voice trembling. "You're fine. You're safe." Then I heard it, the dragging noise. My breath caught, and my heart threatened to hammer its way out of my chest. It was faint but unmistakable, coming from somewhere downstairs. The sound of something heavy being pulled across the floor. I told myself not to move, stay in bed, call someone, anyone. But instead, I found myself slipping out from under the covers, feet touching the cold hardwood. The flashlight trembled in my hand as I crept to the door. I pressed my ear against it, straining to hear over the blood pounding in my ears. The dragging sound came again, louder this time, closer. I shouldn't have opened the door. I know that now, but in that moment, logic and fear collided, leaving me with nothing but a bone-deep need to know. The hallway was empty, bathed in the faint glow of the streetlight filtering through the curtains. I stepped out, my breath hitching with every creak of the floorboards. The sound led me toward the living room, and there it was, the shadow. It was no longer just a dark smudge on the wall. It had formed now, rising up from the floor like a pillar of smoke. Its head tilted toward me, and the room grew impossibly cold. My flashlight flickered, struggling against the oppressive darkness. "You should have stayed away," a voice rasped, low and guttural, emanating from everywhere and nowhere. I stumbled back, the light slipping from my grasp and clattering to the floor. The shadow surged forward, its form twisting and stretching, and I felt its icy tendrils wrap around me. My chest tightened, and my vision blurred. I don't remember much after that. Just the sound of my own screams and a blinding flash of light as the shadow recoiled. When I came to, it was morning. The living room was empty, bathed in warm sunlight, but the memory of the shadow lingered, sharp and vivid. On the coffee table, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Don't go back to the house. It's awake now." I didn't need to ask who had sent it. The message sent a chill racing through me. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. Mrs. Appleton hadn't given me her number, but who else could have sent it? My hands trembled as I typed back, "What do you mean it's awake? What's going on?" The response came almost instantly, as though whoever sent it had been waiting. "Get rid of anything you took from the house. Don't ask questions. Just do it." I froze. My mind raced back to the night before, to the chaos in the basement. I hadn't taken anything, or had I? My jacket, the flashlight. Could something have clung to them? Or worse, to me? Before I could respond, another message appeared. "Check your left pocket." The room seemed to tilt. My left pocket? Slowly, I reached down and slipped my hand inside. My fingers brushed something smooth and cold. I pulled it out, heart hammering. It was a small key. I didn't recognize it. It wasn't mine, and it hadn't been in my pocket when I left for Mrs. Appleton's house. But now, here it was, gleaming dully in the morning light, its shape unfamiliar and unsettlingly sharp. The phone buzzed again. "It's not yours. It never was. Burn it." I shot to my feet, the key clattering onto the table. My instincts screamed at me to listen, to destroy it, get it out of my life, out of my house, but something else held me back. A morbid curiosity. What did it unlock? Why was it left for me to find? The key sat there, innocent and still, but its presence felt wrong, as if the air around it had turned sour. And then the dragging sound came again. This time it wasn't faint or distant. It was right outside my door. I grabbed my phone and the key, shoving them into my pocket. I didn't wait to see what was out there. I bolted for the back door, not stopping to put on shoes or even think about where I was going. The morning sun felt foreign on my skin as I stumbled onto the street. I kept running until I reached the edge of town, my lungs burning. Only then did I dare to look back. The street was empty, calm. Birds chirped. Neighbors tended to their lawns. But I knew better. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking as I sent another message. "I have the key. What do I do now?" This time, there was no response. I didn't go home that night. I drove out to the next town over and checked into a motel, my eyes darting to every shadow and flickering light. The key felt heavier with every passing hour, its weight pulling at my pocket like an anchor. By midnight, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to an empty field on the outskirts of town, a can of gasoline and a box of matches in hand. The air was crisp, the stars cold and indifferent above me. I placed the key on the ground, doused it with gasoline, and struck a match. The flame danced in the breeze as I dropped it onto the key. The fire roared to life, brighter and hotter than it should have been for something so small. The flames twisted unnaturally, writhing like living things. A scream, high-pitched and inhuman, ripped through the night, echoing across the empty field. My hands flew to my ears, but it didn't help. The sound burrowed into my skull, relentless and unbearable. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The fire died out, leaving nothing but scorched earth where the key had been. My phone buzzed. "Good. Don't go back. Ever." This time, I deleted the message. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that I went home, put it behind me, and moved on. But even now, weeks later, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. Shadows seem longer than they should be. Lights flicker when I'm alone. And at night, when the house is quiet, I still hear it. The dragging sound. Weeks turned into months, but the unease never left. I moved into a new apartment, far from the town and far from Mrs. Appleton's house. I told myself it was over. The key was gone, the warnings heeded. Yet the world never felt quite right anymore. The dragging sound followed me. At first, it was faint, almost easy to dismiss. A heavy chair scraping across the floor in the apartment above. Pipes groaning in the walls. But it always came late at night, in those moments when sleep was just about to take me. I tried to ignore it, to drown it out with white noise or music, but the sound would creep through. It wasn't just in my head. I knew that much, and it wasn't random. The dragging had a pattern, a deliberate rhythm, like it was moving closer. Then one night I saw it. I had been staring at the ceiling for hours, too uneasy to close my eyes. The room was pitch black except for the faint green glow of the clock on my nightstand. 3:47 a.m. The air felt heavy, thick with that now familiar wrongness. A shadow moved across the wall. It wasn't the shadow of a tree or a passing car. It had no source, no light to cast it. It moved on its own, stretching and twisting, slithering like liquid ink. I sat up, my breath caught in my throat, and watched as it pooled in the corner of the room. Then it began to rise. The form was familiar now, tall, spindly, with edges that blurred and shifted. Its head tilted toward me, and the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath came out in shaky white clouds. "You burned the key," it said, its voice a chorus of whispers, all speaking at once. "But the door remains." I shook my head, scrambling back against the headboard. No, I destroyed it. It's over." The shadow moved closer, its shape flickering like a dying candle flame. "You let it out," it hissed. "You think fire can stop what's always been?" I reached for my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed the only number I could think of. It rang once, twice, before the call connected. "Mrs. Appleton," I gasped. "It's here. I don't know what to—" The line crackled, a low, distorted noise drowning out her voice. Then the shadow surged forward, and the phone was ripped from my hand. It smashed against the wall, shattering into pieces. "You were warned," the shadow rasped. "Now you'll pay the price." Before I could react, it lunged at me. Darkness enveloped the room, cold and suffocating. I clawed at my throat, gasping for air, as the whispers filled my ears, my mind, my very being. And then I was falling. When I woke up, it was morning. The sunlight streamed through the window, warm and gentle, as if the nightmare had never happened. But my body told a different story. My throat was raw, and my arms were covered in scratches, thin lines of crimson crisscrossing my skin. On the nightstand, where my phone should have been, was a small object. A key. But it wasn't the same one I'd burned. This one was older, its surface tarnished, its edges jagged. Attached to it was a note, scrawled in messy, almost frantic handwriting. "The door is open. Find it. Close it, before it's too late." I stared at the key, dread pooling in my stomach. I had no idea where the door was or how to close it. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Not yet. I didn't touch the key. Not at first. I couldn't bring myself to. Instead, I left it on the nightstand and sat across the room, staring at it as though it might move on its own. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting shifting patterns of light through the window. The key remained still, but its presence gnawed at me. Eventually, the note demanded my attention again. "Find it. Close it. Before it's too late." What door? And how could I possibly close something I didn't understand? I needed answers, and there was only one person who might have them. Mrs. Appleton. I grabbed the key, hesitating only for a moment as the metal seemed unnaturally cold, and shoved it into my pocket. The drive back to the town was a blur. My mind raced with possibilities, each more horrifying than the last. By the time I reached her house, my knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The house was as I remembered it. Old, imposing, and soaked in the eerie weight of history. The windows stared back at me like unblinking eyes, and the porch seemed to sag a little lower, as though the house had grown tired. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. "Mrs. Appleton," I called, my voice echoing across the quiet street. "It's me. I need to talk to you." Still nothing. I tried the doorknob, expecting it to be locked. To my surprise, it turned easily, the door swinging inward with a soft creak. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of old wood and something faintly metallic. "Mrs. Appleton?" I stepped inside, my voice barely above a whisper. The house was silent, eerily so. No ticking clock, no hum of appliances, just an oppressive stillness that pressed against my ears. I moved through the rooms, each one more unsettlingly empty than the last. Her belongings were all there, untouched, as though she'd simply stepped out for a moment. But the layer of dust on the furniture told a different story. Then I saw it. The basement door was wide open. I stared at it, my pulse quickening. The key in my pocket seemed to grow heavier, a subtle warmth radiating from the metal. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to leave and never look back. But the note's words echoed in my mind. "Find it. Close it. Before it's too late." I descended the stairs, the familiar creak of the wood beneath my feet sending shivers up my spine. The basement looked the same as before, dark, damp, and cluttered with shrouded furniture. But something was different this time. In the center of the room stood a door. It hadn't been there before. It was tall, impossibly so, with a frame carved from gnarled, blackened wood that seemed to writhe and twist when I looked at it too long. Symbols were etched into its surface, ancient, unreadable glyphs that pulsed faintly with an otherworldly light. The key in my pocket burned hot against my skin. I pulled it out, holding it up to the door. The glyphs flared brighter, as if acknowledging the key's presence. I didn't want to do this. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, to destroy the key and never think about this place again. But I knew it wouldn't matter. Whatever was behind that door had already started to seep through. With trembling hands, I slid the key into the lock. The metal groaned as it turned, each movement sending a jolt through my body. The air grew heavier, the shadows darker. The door swung open. Beyond it was darkness, a void so complete it seemed to pull at the edges of reality. The whispers returned, louder and more chaotic, spiraling around me like a storm. Shapes moved within the blackness, indistinct, shifting figures that defied comprehension. And then I saw it. A hand, pale and clawed, reached out from the void, gripping the edge of the doorframe. More followed, an arm, a head, a torso. The thing that emerged was wrong, its proportions twisting and changing with every passing second. Its eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment, I felt an overwhelming flood of despair. Couldn't let it through. Summoning every ounce of courage, I pushed against the door, forcing it shut. The creature howled, its voice a symphony of rage and anguish, as I shoved with all my strength. The glyphs burned brighter, and the whispers reached a deafening crescendo. With one final effort, I slammed the door shut. The key glowed white-hot in my hand, and I turned it in the lock. The glyphs flared brilliantly, then dimmed to nothing. The whispers stopped. The basement was silent. I collapsed to the floor, the key falling from my hand and clinking softly against the concrete. The door remained closed, its surface now smooth and lifeless. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sliver of relief. But as I stared at the door, one thought lingered in my mind. This wasn't over. Not yet. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the door. My body ached. My mind felt like it had been stretched to its breaking point, and the oppressive silence of the basement bore down on me. The key lay on the ground, blackened and cracked, its purpose seemingly fulfilled. But the weight in my chest told me otherwise. I needed to know if it was truly over. Gathering the last of my strength, I stood and picked up the key. It was cold now, lifeless. I slipped it into my pocket, its jagged edges pressing against my thigh as I made my way back up the stairs. The house was still empty, still too quiet, but the air felt lighter, as if whatever had lingered here before had finally been purged. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of red and gold. I stepped onto the porch and turned back to the house, its windows dark and uninviting. A part of me wanted to burn it down, to erase every trace of its existence, but I knew that wouldn't change anything. The house was just a shell. Whatever had been here was tied to something far older, far deeper. I climbed into my car and drove away, watching the house shrink in the rearview mirror until it was gone. Weeks passed. I tried to return to normal, to push the events of that night into the back of my mind. But the world didn't feel normal anymore. Shadows still seemed to linger too long in the corners of my vision. Strange noises interrupted the quiet of my apartment. Soft whispers, faint tapping that always stopped when I got too close. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled the key out from where I'd hidden it, locked in a drawer beneath piles of papers. It was still cracked, still blackened, but holding it sent a chill through my body. I needed to know. I spent hours researching, combing through forums, old books, anything that might give me a clue about what I'd encountered. The glyphs on the door, the symbols burned into my memory, appeared in fragments across ancient texts. They spoke of barriers between worlds, seals meant to keep things in or out. But what haunted me most was a passage in a forgotten tome, translated from a language older than history itself. The door can be closed, but the cracks remain, and through them, the watchers wait. My heart sank as I read the words. I thought I'd stopped it. I thought I'd done enough. But now I realized the truth. The door might have been sealed, but the damage was already done. The watchers were still out there, and they weren't done watching. I moved again, farther this time. A new town, a new life. I changed my number, deleted my online presence, and did everything I could to disappear. But some nights, when the wind howls just right and the shadows press against the windows, I hear it. The dragging sound. It's faint, distant, but it's there. And I know it's only a matter of time before the door, or something worse, finds me again.